G'day folks. Well, in an upcoming video, I want to talk about something to do with the void cube. And I thought I'd make this video to try and explain the void parity that occurs and why it occurs. And partly this is for myself to get it right in my head because I've never really properly understood it before. Now, apart from that word that I just said then, parity, I'm not going to use that word in this video again because frankly, I think it's a word that's not well understood. I want to talk about something that I do understand perfectly well, which is the number of swaps of pieces. So for those of you that do understand parity well, I just said it again, forgive me, but for many people I would consider there is a bit of a fog around that word. So with the void cube, we know that we can get a single set of swapped corners at the end. Now this of course could be a single set of swapped edges. My solving method, I do edges first and corners last. So that's why, for me, I'd get the swap of corners. You may do edges last, you get a swap of edges. Now, also from now on, I'm not going to really show this void cube anymore because the sticker colors on this are, frankly, ridiculous. And they're not the same as a normal puzzle, and I want to compare things really clearly. As you know, we can't get this single swap of corners on a normal 3x3 cube. The first thing I want to address is, am I sure about that? Well, to do that, I want to consider first a solved cube. And I want to ask how many swaps of each piece type and also overall are there? Well, what are the piece types? We have corners, edges, and centers. So how many swaps of corners on a solved cube? That's right, 0. They're all in position. How many swaps of edges? No swaps of edges. They're all in position. And what about centers? Once again, no swaps of centers. So overall, we have 0 swaps on a solved cube. Now, I want to ask what happens when we turn any single face one turn. For example, that face or that face, doesn't matter which face. Just turn any face on an ordinary 3x3 one turn. What does it do to the swaps of pieces? Well, I'm going to turn this one just to be clear, I suppose, and consistent. Let's consider the corners. How many swaps of corners are there now in order to take it back to solved? Let's say that we swap the green red with the green orange. So one swap, that'll put the green red in position and the green orange over here. So that one's solved. And of course, I don't care about orientation. I'm just talking about in position. So now I've got the green orange here. Where does that go? To the back corner. So I could swap the green orange and the blue orange. That would put this one in position. These two would be solved. The blue orange is here. I've done 2 swaps so far. Now I could do the blue orange and the blue red. Swap those over. That's 3 swaps and the corners are now in their correct position. So that is 3 swaps of corners. Keep that in mind. What about the edges? Well, same way. The green and the orange edge could swap. That puts that in position. The orange is now here. The orange and the blue could swap. The orange is solved. The blue's now here. And the blue and the red could swap. And they would then be in a solved position. How many swaps of edges? 1, 2, 3. So 3 swaps of corners and 3 swaps of edges. What about centers? Well, no swaps, because all that's happened is that single center has just rotated in place. It hasn't moved anywhere with any other centers. So turning one face or any face one turn, it may change, or in fact it will change the number of swaps of corners and edges. What it will not do is change the overall evenness of the puzzle. You remember that on a solved cube we had 0 swaps. That's an even number. When we do a turn on a cube, we still will end up with an even number of swaps overall. That's really important. Now let's consider the case of a 3x3 with a swap of corners. I said earlier that we can't get a single swap of corners on a 3x3. Well, that's true because here is a swap of corners, the yellow, green, red, the yellow, blue, red. You'll notice there is also a swap of edges. So we have 1 swap of corners, 1 swap of edges, 0 swaps of centers. That is a total of 2 swaps. Overall on the cube, it's an even number of swaps. So what happens on a cube like this? The standard fix that I would use is to turn the upper face 1 turn. Well, we just saw how it changed things on a solved cube. Let's see what happens now. Remember, at the moment, we've got one swap of corners, one swap of edges. I'll turn this upper face one turn. It hasn't touched the lower two layers. What has it done on the upper face? Well, let's consider corners first. Are any in position? Yes, that one is now in position. So let's now consider the yellow, green, orange. That's got to go here. So I'll do a swap of those two. Those two corners will swap. That will be solved, and the yellow, blue, orange will be here. So one swap of corners so far. And then the blue, orange, and the green, red will swap, and that'll solve all the corners. That's two swaps. So now we're on two swaps of corners. What about the edges? Well, you can see that this edge is solved. Let's do the orange. So the orange and blue need to swap, which will solve that. Puts the blue here. That's one swap. And then the blue and the green will swap. That is two swaps of edges to get them solved. Centers, they haven't changed. Still zero swaps. So by doing that turn the upper face one turn routine, I've now changed it from one swap of corners and one swap of edges to two swaps of corners and two swaps of edges. There were two swaps overall. That's an even number. Now there are four swaps overall. That's also an even number. Remember, we cannot change the fact that there's always going to be an even number of swaps overall. And looking at this on an ordinary cube in a normal solve, this is the sort of situation I might get where, and I've just for ease, I've solved the bottom three corners here, but I would be doing the lower edges and then three of these middle layer edges, and then I'd leave this fourth one so I could get the top one solved, and I'd do the two at the back. So the yellow, blue, and the yellow, orange are done. And I'd then say something like, well, we could get a number of scenarios. We could have three edges solved. We could have a three cycle. We could have them in position but two edges flipped. Or we could have a swap of two edges. That's what we've got here. The yellow, red is solved. I've got a swap of two edges. The green, red should be there. The yellow, green should be there. What I would do in a normal solve is say, right, well, we need to turn the upper face one turn and resolve. So let's consider the number of swaps of corners and edges here. Corners first. If I put the white, green, red there, that's one swap, and the yellow, blue, orange goes here. Yellow, blue, orange can swap with the yellow, green, red to solve that one. That's two swaps. Sorry, to solve that one. That's two swaps. That puts the yellow, green, red here, which will swap with the yellow, blue, red. That is three swaps. That's solved. And then the yellow, green, red is also solved. That's solved in position, or that's twisted in position. So that was three swaps. 1, 2, 3. Three swaps of corners. What about the edges? One swap of edges. So once again, three swaps of corners, one swap of edges. We have an even number. Now, I'll turn that upper face one turn. What happens? Well, the corners, the white, green, red swaps with that. That's yellow, blue, orange. That one's solved. The yellow, blue, orange is now also in a solved position. That's in a solved position. I have just these two to swap. So one swap of corners. What about the edges? Well, one swap here to put the yellow, blue in position. The yellow, red's there. One swap here to put the yellow, orange in position. So that's two swaps of edges. The yellow, blue's over here. Oh, sorry, the yellow, red is now over here. So I had solved the yellow, blue. I've then solved the yellow, orange. The yellow, red is here. So then yellow, red, and green, red, that is three swaps, and green, red, and green, yellow, that is four swaps. So you remember that I had two swaps of corners, and I've got four swaps of edges. That's six swaps overall. So looking at the void cube, I've got this single set of swapped corners. I've got a single swap of corners. All the edges are in. I've got zero swaps of edges. Well, overall, we appear to have an odd number of swaps, one swap, but we know this isn't possible. We know that we turned the upper face one turn on a normal cube, and it did not change the overall number of swaps of the whole cube. It always resulted in an even number of swaps. Well, this is true on the void cube as well. So any turn of this void cube always results in an even number of swaps overall. Well, the only other piece type are the centers. And that is in fact what's going on. Here is the analogous scenario with those two corners swapped, but what essentially we have is some centers out. If I look at the green here, the green and the orange need to swap. That'll put the green in. The orange and the red need to swap. That'll put the red in. And the red and the blue need to swap, which will solve, or in fact the red, the blue and the orange, I should say, which will be 3 swaps. So the 3 swaps of centers, the 1 swap of corners, gives us the even number of swaps. Now, in practice, we wouldn't generally swap centers. We would do something to place the centers. So we would say, well, let's turn that slice turn. And then that has dealt with the centers. There are now an even number of swaps of centers. What about the edges? Well, blue-red and blue-orange can swap, which places the blue-red. Now the blue-orange is here, which can swap with the green-red. So those two are placed, that's 2 swaps. And the blue-orange and the green-orange, that's 3 swaps. So there's 3 swaps of edges, 1 swap of corners. Again, 4 swaps. So whether you have it like this or you have it like this. So on a void cube, what we've got is this scenario where the edges are in, the centers are out. What's really going on is we've got this. The centers are out. So how do we do it? Well, as I said, we would turn that slice one turn, which just changes the odd number of swaps from the centers to the edges. On a void cube, using this DIY bandage kit, I would do that, which is what I did. And then I would just go ahead and resolve the edges. And I wouldn't be trying to do it in any efficient way. I know there are algorithms to do that. All I really care about is getting the edges done. So let's just leave this one till last, and I'll come over here and I'll say, what's this one got to be? Green, orange. So I'll bring that up to the top and place the green, orange. The next one's got to be orange, blue, which is sitting over here. And the last one here that I care about is the blue, red. So I'll bring that up to the top as well. So my 3 middle layer edges are done. I've got this 4th one, which happens to be in, but it's flipped, but that doesn't matter. I want to consider the top now. This is the blue face, so I need yellow, blue to go there, and I need yellow, orange to go here. So I'll turn that around and see if I can get the blue into this other back position. What does that leave me with these edges? That's in but flipped. That's yellow, red, and yellow, green need to swap. So now I've got the ordinary case of a 3x3 where I had this, and I'll just say, oh, I better turn the upper face one turn. Put those back 2 edges in again. That one is now in. These 2 are in but flipped. So I'll flip them. The edges are now completely done, and I would then go ahead and solve corners. And you can see that now I have dealt with that single swap of corners, because essentially the centers were out. I put the centers back in, resolved the edges, resolved the corners. So that is what is going on the void cube, and why people say, I've said I wouldn't say it again, but they talk about the void cube parity. Essentially, it is the number of swaps of things are out, and it's something that you can't see. It's a swap of centers. On a void cube, you can't see them. On this cube, you can, and that's what's going on. I hope that's helped and perhaps cleared up a little bit of mystery. It certainly did for me when I worked my way through it. Thanks for watching.